everybody. I'm extremely happy, as always, to be on Sangam Talks. I have a deep appreciation for Rahul Diwan, who has undertaken this project and has already achieved something which is immense, something which is great. It is a record of some most perceptive and eminent speakers of our time on subjects which are in many respects very groundbreaking and are introducing a fresh thinking. So it is my good fortune to participate and share my thoughts with you people on this forum. So let me begin with a auspicious Mangala Charan in praise of Shiva. Ganga Taranga Ramaniya Jata Kalapam Gauri Nirantara Vibhushitavam Bhagam Narayana Priyam Ananga Madapaharam Varanasi Purapatim Bhaja Vishwanatham Varanasi Purapatim Bhaja Vishwanatham. Friends, we are going to approach a topic which in itself is not very pleasant, which is going to examine something which has gone wrong with our 70-year-old modern nation state. I'm not saying with our country or civilization, which, as you know, is thousands and thousands of years old, but I am saying the modern nation state of India. So something that has gone wrong, and the title of this talk is Dusty Villages and Dying Cities. So I'm going to talk about urban India and how urban India is a prominent feature of Indian life now, or the Indian state, and any drawback in it or any suffering in it is something which causes a lot of suffering in India as a whole. You see, once upon a time we used to say, in my childhood I was asked to write essays in school on it all the time, भारत गांवों में बसता है, भारत गांवों का देश है, ours is a country of villages. Now, of course, that is true even today, but in reality now, after 70 years, ours is a city conglomerative nation state. The large cities, metropolitans, and the huge number of smaller cities or Kasba cities, Mufassil cities, they are the ones where the bulk of it, not only the bulk of India lives, or perhaps maybe a little less than the bulk of India lives, but India that sets the tone of the modern civilization of India. So it is a matter of great concern that we have dusty villages and dying cities. Not a very pleasant title of my talk, but I want to be realistic and I want to look at our faults for the very simple reason that if we love our country, we must take care of what is wrong with it. That is also part of nationalism, which some of us may tend to forget in our enthusiasm. How did this come about? Well, it's very easy to say that it's all a fault of Jawaharlal Nehru. In reality, that is the truth. But then, how did it come about? That is more important. Well, for the obvious reason that Jawaharlal chose the model of Soviet Union in the 5-year plan and the general development of the nation. And same mistakes were made in India which were made in China. Which were made in Russia. That is, it was the Moscow, Petersburg, and various other cities, Leningrad, etc., which dominated the scene, which defined what was Russia, rather than the huge expanse. And therefore, after a certain time, so many regions of Soviet Union broke away and became separate nations. Now, of course, God forbid if any such thing happens to us, and we should be very careful about it, and for different reason it may happen. But the primary cause is that planning was city oriented. Planning was not village oriented. At this point, the Gandhians will rush in and simply say that, look, we told you, don't neglect Gandhi. Although on paper, in party, Jawaharlal Nehru was a disciple of Gandhi, but in practice he was not. And so he had a very different model. But even the Gandhian model, as so many of us, because of his Gram Swarajya and because of his various other concepts, think, even the Gandhian model was not something which really wanted to use the social structure of Indian society as it existed in the countryside and in the villages. At this point, I must point out that in India, throughout history, although we had a large number of cities, the distance between the city and the village was not so great. Of course, there was city life, and sometimes it was the capital, and it was very sophisticated, and most of the wealth was in the cities. But everything that existed in the cities was being sustained by the villages constantly. It is not the post-industrialization situation which we have all studied in our history books, or something which happened from, let us say, earliest 20th century and very rapidly after the country became independent with industrialization and modern technology. This was not the situation. The countryside was constantly and on a daily basis sustaining the city. And it's not that if you wanted to do something in the city, you could not live in the countryside. So the distance between the Nagara and the Gram, between the what was the citizen, Nagarik, cosmopolitan citizen, or what was called in Greece as somebody living in a polis, and was a politis, somebody who lived in the city. That and the village was not the same in India as it was in Greece, because India was largely a middle class society, and the wealth of Indian middle class was in the hands of the people who produce the goods, the so-called workers, the so-called Shudras, according to the older classification of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. You see, we have a very distorted notion of the working class or the people who work with the hands today. We think that they were all like Chandalas living somewhere on the fringe. Now that's all nonsense. The people who were producing the wealth of India, they lived mostly in villages, entirely in villages, and a few of them lived in the city. So the village was constantly feeding the city, and the city was constantly feeding the village. So when you look at Arthashastra, then you will see that the Arthashastra is talking about an adhikshak, that is a high officer like the Secretary of the State in the present government, who would be visiting people in the villages as well as in the cities all the time of his area. So the point I am making is that wealth was produced in the cities, and not just agricultural wealth, but education was in cities. The bulk of agraharas, or the bulk of ashramas, gurukulas, they were all outside the cities. And according to the ancient system, in which you had the four ashramas, Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyas, the two of them were to be lived outside the city. You became Vanaprastha after you did your money making or you did what was necessary for the family. Then you went somewhere outside the city in either a gram or a one or a periphery, and you spent your time there. But you were not cut off with civilization. So this was a continuum. Now this continuum, of course, was disturbed very badly in earlier Islamic times. I don't have time to go into the details as to how this happened, because the Islamic cities were also city oriented. The Muslim rulers, they had their capital and their cities more like cantonments, Their capital was where their wealth and concentration and their bureaucracy lived. Now the same thing was continued by the British, and the same thing continued with Jawaharlal Nehru and his socialist model. So I, as somebody who has seen Delhi grow from maybe something like 100 offices into 100,000 offices, know this very well. And I have seen the great secretariat become huge and huge, and now we are going to have something much bigger, the Central Vista. So the whole bureaucracy being concentrated just around one place, this is the real model which came into existence after the ancient Indian model had been changed by the Islamic rule. So this was the divide already existing. Now, what I am saying practically is this, that today, if a villager has a land dispute, he cannot get it settled in his village or in a larger village or anywhere within 50 miles. He has to go to a small town. He has to go to a district court or a branch of the district court, Mufassil court. So you don't have justice available, you don't have education available. You used to have jobs available when land was something you could own, but as population grew in India, that also fell short, and people in huge numbers, as you know, moved to the cities. If you don't have education, if you don't have justice, if you don't have administration, bureaucracy visiting you, or the state being present there, then all you have is the police. And that's not a healthy relationship for a citizen, that the major representation of the state in the village is the local thana. You understand what I am trying to point out and how the big difference happened. Now with Jawaharlal's whole notion, this thing became firmly entrenched. Of course, everybody will tell you, every political party will tell you that we brought water to the villages, we brought gas connection to the villages, we brought roads to the villages. But you see, this is the whole model. You are bringing roads from where? You are bringing roads from the big cities to the village. You are not making roads from village to the cities. You see the big difference? The whole model of development was not of doing things in the village so that the cities could benefit, so that the cities could be part of it, but everything, all modernity was in cities, and therefore modernity had to be distributed into the villages which were old, which were paramparic or traditional, or which did not know how to live in modern times. So you see, this big disjunct happened. Now this disjunct is something which has caused dusty villages and therefore dying cities, because cities cannot sustain themselves. If they become too large, if they become dominant, then they crumble under their own weight. And we are seeing this phenomena now all over the world, not just in India. Just see what happened to New York last week. It's all flooded, swamped. Millions are without their daily activity now. So this is happening all over the world. And the primary reason is that the model has been inverted. Now, regarding the prosperity of the villages, what was the biggest reason why there could be no trade? Because the whole notion of what is it that gives you a living underwent a radical alteration and a perversion. I would say a perversion. Now you would know that till 30 or 40 years ago, in a village, there was a person for every need. So there was a carpenter, there was a barber, there was a fisherman, there was a school teacher, there was a person of profession right there. It's not as if the villages did not have all these professionals. It's not that the villages had only farmers or hunters or food gatherers of this kind, or just farmers. No. Villages had people of every profession. But what happened was that under the socialist and the modern model, we did not develop those professions. You see, when modernity came to India, according to Jawaharlal's model, then modernity displaced all the old profession. Not just the Pandit who would give you mantras and who would be giving you a little bit of Sanskrit knowledge, or who would be managing your village temple, or who would be making pravachan. Not just him that you targeted. It was not just him who was thought to be eased out of modernity, but every trade was eased out of modernity. The idea that there will be education of the Western liberal kind. In other words, it would be an education based upon books, based upon rote learning. It would not be an education based upon profession or skills. Now it is after 70 years that we are talking of developing skills, skill development. The word skill is spoken with a heavy Gujarati accent, skill. I mean, allow me to have a little bit of humor here. Unfortunately, we had forgotten it. So it's a very good thing that we are now thinking about it. But this is something which we allow to die. When I say dying villages, then you allowed the village barber to die. You allowed the village fisherman to die. You allowed the mason. You allowed all those carpenters and all those people who were in a profession. Instead of educating them as professions, I mean, some people may like to use the word jatis. Okay, if you are allergic to use of the word jati, varna jati, carpenter jati, khatik, etc., then I'll just use the English word. But education was needed for them. Modernity was needed for them. A teaching of how to use more equipment, better equipment, how to do carpentry with new conditions, with newer technology, that was needed at the village level. And that is missing even today. Even today, our model of education, whether in the village or in the city, is the book and blackboard model. Now, of course, the book and the blackboard model has been replaced by, the mobile or the integrated screen. But then it is still that visual model of learning about things but not doing things, which was radically different. So, because we took a heavy top-down model from the West and we imposed it in our cities, in our villages, we had a severe lack of productivity in the villages, and hence you had this huge amount of populations moving from the village to the city. Now, this is the general model I gave. This is the model of the economic distortion that happened. Now I'll give you the other cause. The biggest cause which has prevented people from asking for the right things and getting the right things is the vote bank politics. You see, in modern democracy, we made a very big mistake. We got entangled into the notion of equality, liberty, equality, liberty, and fraternity. These three great French values were imposed with a vengeance. And what happened, that when you talk of a vote, you never think for a moment if the largest number of people who are going to vote would have the sense to vote correctly or not. But you just want the largest number of people to be your voters. And so there came a time, and this movement was started by BJP, by one of the leaders of the BJP himself, I think Advani ji, that the voting age should be reduced from 21 to 18. I don't remember which year it was done, but it was about 20 years ago. And at that time, the BJP thought that it would give them electoral advantage. And maybe, I don't remember, it did them for a while. But what it did was, it brought in a whole section of population from 18 to 21, which was and will be always very volatile. Which means that they are emotional, they know not enough. And as it is in the modern world, which is very complicated, even 21 is perhaps not a mature enough age for you to vote. Then when you vote at 18, then every senior school girl or school boy and every college student becomes a voter. And as a teacher at Delhi University, I have seen how this single act of lowering the voting age to 18 played havoc with the colleges and may not be so much with class 11 and 12, but at least with colleges. And it brought in a whole generation of politicians who made the college campus into a training ground for entering the parliament. Now, you can always feel happy by taking a few eminent names, but then you are compelled not to mention a huge number of names who are famous for unwanted things. So, this democratic system of enlarging the voter population actually made our legislators weaker and weaker. And what you see now is a direction that democracy is taking, which is not very much in the interest of the state as a whole. With modern technology, just in last 5 years, the voter is now internationally influenced. He or she is not influenced just by local issues, but is swayed by all kinds of propaganda which is available on electronic media and right through your mobile phone. And therefore, any section of voting population which is not mature is a danger for democracy and not a strength of democracy. So I personally think that the reason of mismanagement of all kinds, not only at the village level, but more so at the city level, the formation of those massive slums, disorganized areas, and now everything getting clogged, not just our roads and our sewage system in the monsoon, but everything in a big city getting clogged one time or the other. In 1 week it is clogged because of a political agitation, another week it is clogged because of rain, on third week it is clogged because of some international conference and VIP movement, on fourth week it is clogged because of a railway strike, then another week we have to suffer if there is an airline strike or something like that. So we experience a state which is spasmodically getting clogged. And this is largely because the populations have become volatile. And this is something we have to seriously think about. So how do you prevent how do you prevent legislative immaturity? Because it is not just the immaturity of the leader or the compulsion of the leader that he or she has become a lame duck leader, that he or she is always held hostile by the larger number of voters. And you know, in last 5 years we have this trend that every politician say, मैं बिजली आपको मुफ्त दूंगा, मैं पानी मुफ्त दूंगा, मैं आपको सब कुछ मुफ्त दूंगा. Now this whole trend has started coming in India to the detriment of the fiscal situation of the country. So this legislative immaturity is very, very unfortunate. And the third reason for the villages becoming underdeveloped and the cities becoming overweight, in development. I mean, they have become so developed that they can be compared to huge, fat people who are all the time threatened with heart disease, diabetes, and blood pressure. Our cities are more or less like that. So, the major reason is that in India, we were given a very schizophrenic kind of identity. On one hand, we were told that jati, varna jati or caste is a thing of the past and it should be set aside. That you should marry without thinking about your wife's caste. You should choose a partner. In marriage, it should not be endogamy of the old system. We should liberate ourselves. In all social relationship, caste should not have any factor. But when you go to vote, then you vote your caste. Before you cast your vote, you vote your caste. Now this is a perversion which came in, and in my lecture I will address as to how this happened as a result of Western ethnography and ethnology and ethnic studies. But this is something which created a huge number of caste politicians and small caste leaders all over the country. And these people have not been able to think of the nation. They are only thinking of their vote bank based on caste. And this has created a very big problem, especially for the young. Why for the young? Because in the last 20 years, Indian population has become very mobile. Young people want to leave their homes, their home state or their city and settle in another part of the country because they see a new life there, because they are adventurous. So somebody from New Delhi may want to settle in Chennai or in a smaller town in Madhya Pradesh, in Riva or somewhere. And with all this kind of state politics that goes on, where every state is living in a watertight compartment of restrictions based upon language, upon domicile laws, upon the difficulty of transferring your credits from one university to another, all kinds of even simple things like transferring your vehicle number. If you have a motorcycle or a car, then it takes 6 months to transfer your number, and then you must transfer your number. All these things are a result of this small thinking, not thinking about the nation as a whole. So if on one side or at one level we have used technology to radically change ourselves and become very mobile, and to interchange and accept things from different parts of the country. Like dosa and idli is no longer South Indian food, it is all India food now. So there are so many transformations which are taking place, but the politics of caste is something which has obstructed it. So in this lecture, I am talking and concentrated more upon some very serious legislative problems which are there constitutionally. I would like to emphasize that we have to think about caste not in terms of that which we have simply inherited, but we have to think it in terms of skills that we can develop. You see, all jati, all varna was economy based, and it was based upon your identity that you create through a profession. It was something which was based upon your skills. Now, instead of looking upon the skills, a politician doesn't look upon how he can benefit the engineers, how he can benefit the academics, or the doctors, or the lawyers, or the judges. He doesn't think about how he can benefit the professionals, or the artists, or the painters, or the dancers. You see, these are not the people he gives a damn about, but he will say, how many Brahmins are there? अब यूपी में वो सब हिसाब लगा रहे हैं, ये कितने ब्राह्मण हैं, कहाँ हैं? So nobody is worrying about the people who are earning their living through skills. And if you support them as skilled people, then they would benefit and the economy would benefit. But on the contrary, we have got lost in this jungle of, and it was a result of this that we had a very perverted system in which we wanted to keep linguistic states so that there could be units in which we could play this caste politics. You see, what is it that makes caste politics so easy and available? It is the division of our linguistic states. Now, as a matter of fact, the linguistic states themselves have become partially redundant. I am told that in every big city like Calcutta or Bengaluru or Bombay or Delhi, maybe 20% or 25 or 30% people are non-native speaker to that particular language of the state. So if you take the case of Bengaluru, I am told that maybe even up to 30% of population of Bengaluru city is non-Kannada speaking. And if we do a consensus on that, which is more important than a consensus of caste, I don't think a consensus of caste is required today. Of course, the politician want it because they have made it a basis of giving the goodies because of reservation. One understands that. I don't have time to speak about that today. But I am only trying to point out that the states have become rather outdated. Because if you have 30% people in Bengaluru who don't speak Kannada, who are not native Kannada speaker but from outside the state, then Bengaluru on the whole, not just Bengaluru, Karnataka on the whole is a state where you have a huge non-Kannada speaking population, and they now have made a reflection upon the very identity of the state. So the very identity of our states is something which has become questionable. And the new divisions that we are making, like we made Uttarakhand, we made Jharkhand, we made Telangana, were these very wise steps? Did they not actually benefit caste politics, if not anything else? So these are some of the big hurdles that have happened. And when I wrote this book, India, A Cultural Decline or Revival, these were some of the things dominant in my mind. As a matter of fact, this book, which was published in 2008, is a refurbishing of essays which I had been writing for the last 20 years, that is from 1995 onwards, something like that, or even earlier. Because in India, the real issues have not changed. For the past 40 years, the real issues have not changed. And the real issues are the ones which I just mentioned. Our villages, they are still not looking after people who live there and practice a profession. And you still have people who inherit a profession, who are somehow struggling with that profession, who give up that profession and then finally move to a city slum. But if they are provided something at their very own level, then things would be radically different. So this, to my mind, is the real reason why there is no development, why the villages are still dusty and the cities have become unmanageable and are almost dying. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I would be very happy to take questions. हाँ, देखिए, आपका प्रश्न है कि भारत की संस्कृति, भारत की प्राचीनतम संस्कृति कौन सी दूसरी संस्कृति से मैच करती रही है। तो देखिए, मैं आपको एक बात बताऊंगा कि कुछ मानों में तो भारत की संस्कृति का चीन से या यूनान से या मिस्र इत्यादि से कुछ समानता रही है, लेकिन ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई बहुत बड़ी हमारी समानताएं हैं। हमारी संस्कृति बहुत विशिष्ट है, और ये मैं किसी अहंकार से नहीं कह रहा, क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ जो व्यवस्थाएं थी वो हमने इतनी स्पष्ट रूप से बनाई थी कि दूसरे सभ्यताएं वो नहीं बना पाई। शायद इसीलिए हम एक प्रकार से इस कंटिन्यूटी में चल रहे हैं, जबकि दूसरी नहीं चल पाए। और देखिए, जैसे एक दो चीजें ही बता देता हूँ आपके, क्योंकि प्रश्न है और छोटा सा उत्तर देना है मुझे। जैसे भारत में हमेशा से एक बहुत बड़ा मिडिल क्लास रहा। ग्रीस में कोई मिडिल क्लास नहीं था, यूरोप में कोई मिडिल क्लास नहीं था, चीन के अंदर भी बहुत छोटा सा मिडिल क्लास था, जापान में भी। और जहां भारत गया और संस्कृति को उसने बहुत प्रभावित किया, थाईलैंड इत्यादि, कंबोडिया इत्यादि, जिनके आज के नाम है, पुराने नाम दूसरे हैं, तो वहां एक बहुत बड़ा मिडिल क्लास व्यवस्था पैदा हुई। अब ये एक बात रही। दूसरी बात, भारत में कला के प्रति एक बहुत बड़ी जागरूकता थी, और हर चीज को कलात्मक बनाना, और इसलिए कि हर चीज को स्किल्ड बनाना। जैसे गीता में कहा है योगा कर्मसु कौशलम, तो भारत में ये तो था ही, सबसे अच्छी बात थी कि योगा कलासु कौशलम, हर चीज को कलात्मक बनाना। अब ये भी एक हमारी बहुत बड़ी उपलब्धि थी और हमारी संस्कृति की पहचान थी। इस तरह से बहुत सारी चीजें हैं जो फिर हमारा समाज ऐसा था कि उसके अंदर अत्याचार को रोकने के बहुत सारे सैद्धांतिक तरीके थे जो कि बना दिए गए थे। जैसे आप राजा विजय करेगा तो शहर में आग नहीं लगाएगा, लूटपाट नहीं करेगा। हाँ, कभी कभी कुछ राजाओं ने कर दी, उसके रिकॉर्ड भी हैं, लेकिन प्रायः ऐसा मना था, धर्मशास्त्रों में मना था। कुछ धर्मों की किताबों में तो लिखा है कि आप औरतों को बंदी बना लीजिए, गुलाम बना लीजिए, मर्दों को और बच्चों को, लेकिन भारत में तो उसके ठीक विपरीत लिखा है कि प्रजा को छूइए नहीं, केवल राजा अगर लड़ता है तो उसे मारिए और जीतिए, और उसके बाद उसका राजकोष आप ले सकते हैं, लेकिन प्रजा में लूटपाट नहीं करेंगे। तो ये आपके प्रश्न पर एक जवाब है। देखिए, आप जो बात कह रहे हैं वो बिल्कुल सही बात है। इस समय भारत की संस्कृति पर बहुत प्रकार के अटैक्स हो रहे हैं और बड़े सूक्ष्म रूप से हो रहे हैं। आपका ये कहना बिल्कुल सही है कि भारत पर क्या अमुक जो उदाहरण दिया वो कल्चर पर अटैक था। अब आज तो भारत के कल्चर पर कई प्रकार के अटैक्स हैं। मैं तो समझता हूं कि सारा बॉलीवुड भारत के कल्चर पर एक अटैक बन गया है। हमारी अधिकांश शिक्षा पद्धति ह्यूमैनिटीज में भारत के कल्चर पर एक अटैक बन गई है। हमारे देश में जो सरकार ने मंदिरों को सरकारी शिकंजे में रखा हुआ है, और इसमें भारतीय जनता पार्टी पूरी तरह से शामिल है, जैसे कांग्रेस थी, उसने भारत की सांस्कृतिक विरासत को वैसे ही रौंदा हुआ है जैसा कि इस्लामिक राजाओं ने मध्यकाल में रौंदा था, और वो वैसे ही हिंदुओं की संपत्ति का दुरुपयोग कर रहे हैं जैसा कि मुसलमान एक जमाने में करते थे। आज हमारे लोग कर रहे हैं, हमारी राजनीतिक पार्टियां कर रही हैं, और हम लोग ही विरोध करके आवाज उठाकर उनसे ये नहीं कहते कि हमारे मंदिर हमको दो, हम उसे चलाएंगे, आप कौन होते हो। हमारी संस्कृति अलाउ नहीं करती। राजा कभी मंदिर नहीं चलाता था। राजा मंदिर बनाता भी था तो उसको चलाने के लिए समितियां बना देता था, और उसकी परंपरा और आगम शास्त्र और सब व्यवस्थाएं हुआ करती थी। तो अटैक्स तो देखिए बहुत बड़े हैं, और उसी कारण से चूंकि मंदिरों के ऊपर हमारा अधिकार नहीं है, तो हमारी पूरी शिक्षा और संस्कृति हमारे हाथ से जा चुकी है। अंग्रेजों ने यह काम सन 30-35 में शुरू कर दिया था, और आज कोई राजनीतिक पार्टी नहीं है, कोई, मैं बड़े स्पष्ट शब्दों में कहता हूं, आज कोई भारत का नेता नहीं है जो इस बात को गहराई से समझता हो। आपने ये प्रश्न पूछा है कि क्या अर्थशास्त्र जो चाणक्य का है उसकी जो आर्थिक व्यवस्थाएं हैं या जो उसमें इकोनॉमिक्स दिया हुआ है उसका कोई आज लाभ है या नहीं। देखिए, बहुत लाभ है। लाभ जो होता है वो इस प्रकार से नहीं होता कि वहां जो लिटरली लिखा है आप उसको वैसे ही कर दें। आपको ये लेना पड़ता है कि वो सिस्टम क्या था। अब आज आप अधीक्षक बनाएंगे, यानी कंट्रोलर जिसको कहते हैं, कंट्रोलर ऑफ दिस, कंट्रोलर ऑफ दैट, तो वो कंट्रोलर जनरल, आज की भाषा में उसके कुछ और नाम होंगे, तो वो दूसरे प्रकार से सिलेक्ट होंगे, लेकिन सिद्धांत तो वही होगा जो चाणक्य ने बताए हैं कि किनको आप बेस्ट ऑफिसर बनाएं और कैसे उन हाईएस्ट ऑफिसर का सिलेक्शन करें, कैसे ब्यूरोक्रेसी का सिलेक्शन हो, वो सिद्धांत तो वही होंगे। आधुनिक काल में आप उसका प्रयोग करेंगे, उसके अंदर आपको आधुनिक समय को लेकर करना होगा, लेकिन सिद्धांत तो वही होगा कि वो भारत की संस्कृति को जानते हो, उनको कुछ अनुभव हो। ऐसा नहीं है रट रटा के आ गए, इम्तहान के अंदर एक लिस्ट बन गई, जिसके मर्जी आई टॉप पे अगर जो है तो वो चला गया फॉरेन सर्विस में, नहीं तो चला गया वो क्या कहते हैं IRS रेवेन्यू सर्विस में। तो ये जो गड्ढमड्ढ सिस्टम है अंग्रेज का बनाया हुआ, जिसका लक्ष्य जो था वो केवल शासन करना था और खून चूसना था भारत की जनता का, जिसको आज तक हम नहीं हटा पाए हैं। कोई सरकार शायद सोच भी नहीं रही है उसको हटाने की आज तक। तो अगर आप चाणक्य को देखेंगे, उसने बिल्कुल स्पष्ट रूप में कहा है कि क्या कमियां होती हैं कायस्थों में, यानी ब्यूरोक्रेसी में, किस प्रकार से वो रिश्वत लेने के आदी होते हैं और उनके लिए कौन से साधन होने चाहिए उनको कंट्रोल में रखने के। ये सारी चीजें हमें आज भी हम, और बहुत सारे सिद्धांत हैं। टैक्सेशन, चाणक्य ने 15% से ज्यादा टैक्स करने की इजाजत नहीं दी है। आपातकाल में भी 15% टैक्स होगा। आज तो 50-60% टैक्स है अगर आप इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेशन को ले लें तो। कुछ ऐसे एरियाज थे जिसमें टैक्स हाई था, लेकिन उसमें सरकार दान बहुत करती थी, पब्लिक बेनिफिट बहुत करती थी, जैसे गोवंश इत्यादि के प्रचार में। तो इस प्रकार से अब उसके ऊपर एक अलग ही लेक्चर करना होगा, अलग ही व्यवस्था करनी होगी। आपका ये प्रश्न है कि क्या गुरुकुल व्यवस्था को अगर हम ले आएंगे तो हमारी समस्याओं का हल हो जाएगा। देखिए, गुरुकुल व्यवस्था एक पुरानी अर्थव्यवस्था के अंदर काम करती थी, और गुरुकुल व्यवस्था में जो शिक्षा दी जाती थी वो उस समय की अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए पर्याप्त थी, क्योंकि जिसको आज हम सेकेंडरी एजुकेशन कहते हैं या हाई स्कूल तक की जो एजुकेशन कहते हैं, वो घरों में ही सबको दे दी जाती थी। 12 साल की उम्र तक एवरेज बच्चा भारत में घर के अंदर ही अपने माँ बाप से सीखता था, चाहे वो कहार का हो, चाहे धुनैये का हो, चाहे मछुआरे का हो, चाहे वो एक सेनापति का हो, चाहे किसी वेद पाठी ब्राह्मण का हो। एवरेज अराउंड 10 इयर्स तक तो वो रहता ही था। एवरेज की बात कर रहा हूं, भेद था उसमें, लेकिन 3/4 शिक्षा उसको घर पे मिल जाती थी। और ये जितने भी आजीविका के लिए उपक्रम थे, यानी प्रोफेशनल एजुकेशंस थे, ये सब घर पर मिल जाती थी। फिर हायर एजुकेशन के लिए वो लोग जाते थे जिनको वेद, शास्त्र, काव्य इत्यादि सूक्ष्मता से पढ़ने हैं, जिसको आप रियली हायर एजुकेशन कहते थे। और उसके ऊपर भी बड़ी स्ट्रॉन्ग गेट कीपिंग थी, हर एक को नहीं दिया जाता था। आज हमारे सिद्धांत अलग है। आज हम, वो व्यवस्था नहीं है, वो अर्थ व्यवस्था नहीं है कहीं भी दुनिया में। तो आज आपको शिक्षा वही देनी पड़ेगी जिसको कहते हैं कि सबको शिक्षा सुलभ हो, सब जाएं, सबको अधिकार हो, और 11वीं 12वीं क्लास तक स्कूल जाना पड़ेगा। आज तो माँ बाप ही घर में नहीं रहते, तो वो सिखाएंगे क्या आपको? बच्चे को आप आज तो आप बच्चे को डे केयर में भेज देते हैं, 2 साल के बच्चे को। तो आपको ये देखना है कि अब एक नई व्यवस्था प्रणाली बनानी होगी। लेकिन हाँ, पुरानी शिक्षा के जो सिद्धांत थे, जो मूल्य थे, आपको उन्हें लेना होगा। तो पुराने मूल्य ये थे, चीजों को बर्बाद मत करो, विनयशीलता रखो, सीखो, बड़ों का आदर करो, ये मानो कि हमें हर तरह की जिम्मेदारी लेनी है। अधिकार से बड़ा जो है वो धर्म होता है। मेरी जिम्मेदारी क्या है, मुझे समाज को देना क्या है। जब मैं ये करने लगूं तब मैं पूछूं कि मेरा अधिकार क्या है। तो ये जो वैल्यू है, इसको हमें वापस लाना होगा। आज जो वैल्यू है, एवरीबडी हैज राइट्स, चिल्ड्रन हैव राइट्स, होमोसेक्सुअल है, एवरीथिंग इज इन टर्म्स ऑफ राइट्स। नाउ दैट इज समथिंग वी हैव टू चेंज. You can't have this whole system of only asking from the state to do everything for you. You see, you have raised a very fundamental question. And the question, if I can summarize all the comments that you made, if I can summarize, is this: that what is going to be the approach of creating the values of a citizen in modern India, which are different from the values of, let us say, Western societies or Western consumerist model? Basically, आपका सवाल ये है। तो अब इसके उत्तर में what I have to say is this: yes, we have to stand up and say that our values are entirely different. Yes, we follow democracy, we will not become monarchy, we will not have Islamic State return as 54 Islamic states are going back to Sharia. No, we will go forward, we will keep modernity, but our values would be different. The values would not be consumerism. The values would not be enjoyment. They would be a balance. They would be a balance between dharma, artha, kam and moksha. They would be a balance between responsibility and asking for things from the state. Today I want the state to give me everything, but I want to give nothing to the state except taxes. Once I have paid my taxes, then I go to the rooftop and keep shouting, why have you not given me this? So I want to do everything. I want to get drunk and drive a car into a lamp post. And then when I go to a hospital, then if there is some problem with the doctor, then I blame the state for it. But I forget that it was I who caused the accident. I mean, this is a metaphorical example. एक रूपक मैंने आपके सामने रखा. Now we have to change that. And that will be changed by changing our cultural and educational values. जो हमारे स्कूल में, कॉलेजों में, समाज में, मंदिरों में, संस्थाओं में, आश्रमों में, मस्जिदों में, मदरसों में, सब में करना होगा. So we have to change entirely different. We have to give an entirely different set of values to the people. If we don't, then we will sink along with other Western societies. In last 2 years, with the rise of Corona, we have seen what a great disaster has happened. Nobody knows why Corona happened, where it happened, and this is a confusion prevailing in the so-called age of science, so-called age of information. So it is actually a confusion caused by lack of values, lack of honesty. This is my answer. Well, your first question is that if Jati politics has receded, then has linguistic politics or regional politics based upon linguistic identities taken over? This process, you're right, is there now very strong, but the seeds of it were laid very early. Even before independence, when Jawaharlal Nehru wanted to make linguistic states, he declared it in 1935 in a Congress working committee that they will go for that. And we should not have made linguistic states, that's what I think. But how do we get out of it? I think it is the young people who will have to point out that just as caste endogamy is no longer viable, कि आप अपनी जात की लड़की से लड़के से ही शादी करेंगे, जैसा अब ये आज आधुनिक समाज में संभव नहीं है और जैसे हमने उसको पीछे छोड़ दिया है, इसी तरह से linguistic formation of the Indian states has to be reconsidered, and we have to make a fresh division of Indian states on other basis, or at least we have to make the present linguistic states more multilingual. जैसे कर्नाटक की केवल कन्नड़ नहीं, कन्नड़ के साथ मराठी और तेलुगु भी उसकी भाषा हो, हर प्रांत की 2 या 3 भाषाएं हैं, तो उसकी आइडेंटिटी को एनलार्ज करना है, जिससे कि वो भारत के अंदर अपनी ही अस्मिता को न ढूंढे बल्कि भारत की अस्मिता की तरफ बढ़े. ये मेरा कहना है. और मैं समझता हूँ कि नौजवान लोग आप जैसे इसको समझते हैं समझेंगे और ये एक ना एक दिन होगा, क्योंकि भारत में हमेशा से एक बहुभाषीय समाज रहा है और वो बहुभाषीय समाज ही भारत की सच्चाई है। और हमारे नेता भी जब उसकी सेवा करेंगे बहुभाषीय समाज की, तो उनकी भी तरक्की होगी। देखिए, आपका प्रश्न यही है कि गांवों में आजीविका क्यों नहीं है, आज क्यों नहीं है, और इसका प्रबंध जब देश आजाद हुआ तो क्यों नहीं हुई। तो अपने इस व्याख्यान के प्रारंभ में ही मैंने कहा कि गांवों में जितने भी प्रकार की जातियां थी वो व्यावसायिक जातियां थी। हमने उनको वही स्किल डेवलपमेंट नहीं दिया उनकी जातियों में, हमने उनको ब्लैक बोर्ड दे दिया और उनको फटे पुराने क्या कहते हैं फर्श पर बिठा दिया, कच्चे फर्श पर, और कहा कि यहाँ स्कूल की शिक्षा होगी। तो ये जो बहुत बड़ी समस्या है, ये पूरी की पूरी समस्या हमारी अपनी बनाई हुई है और हमने शिक्षा पद्धति को, पश्चिम की शिक्षा पद्धति को आंख मूंद कर अपना लिया है। मेरा तो ये कहना है कि आप कुछ और सिखाएं ना सिखाएं, हाँ सिखाएं, बहुत कुछ सिखाएं, लेकिन क्लास 6ठी से लेकर 12वीं क्लास तक 7 वर्ष हर स्कूल के अंदर 1 या 2 आजीविका सिखाने का प्रावधान होना चाहिए। और 7 वर्ष में लड़की या लड़का ITI लेवल की उसके अंदर क्षमता पैदा हो जाए। और देश के सारे स्कूलों में 250 या 300 इस प्रकार की आजीविकाएं चिन्हित की जाए, आइडेंटिफाई की जाए, जो अलग अलग स्कूलों में कहीं 1 कहीं 2 सिखाई जाए, और उस इलाके के और उस प्रांत के हिसाब से वहाँ लोगों की क्या ज़रूरत है। तो अगर उड़ीसा के क्या कहते हैं समुद्र का किनारा है, तो वहाँ आप थोड़े से मछुआरे बनाइए, और मछुआरे का मतलब ये नहीं खाली मछली मारेंगे, वो बहुत कुछ जानेंगे कि मछलियों की नाव कैसी होती है, उनका व्यापार कैसा होता है। 7 साल में आप ये सब सिखाएंगे उनको। तो ये व्यवसाय की शिक्षा हमें देनी है। उसके साथ आप संगीत भी दिखाइए, नाटक भी सिखाइए, कुछ भी सिखाइए, विज्ञान भी सिखाइए, इतिहास भी सिखाइए। उसके बारे में ये बहस भी कर लीजिए कि आर्य आए थे या नहीं आए थे, लेकिन कम से कम ये तो सिखा दीजिए 7 वर्ष तक। तो मेरा तो हमेशा से यही सुझाव है, लेकिन लगता नहीं कि हमारे कमीशन और हमारे न्यू एजुकेशन पॉलिसीज और ये सब विचार अभी भारत के नेतृत्व में अभी ये विचार है भी कहीं। इसकी थोड़ी बहुत चिंता होती है, स्किल डेवलपमेंट के नाम पर इसका यशोगान होता है, लेकिन इसको व्यवहार में लाना ऐसा मुझे नहीं लगता कि अभी संभव हो पाएगा, क्योंकि सोच ही नहीं।